Zooey Mama! How's it going, everybody? I'm here today to talk about Makkari, the new card coming to Marvel Snap. And originally, everybody kind of thought Makkari would be the worst card of this season, but she was just buffed like a week ago to now be 4 power instead of 3. So, does that change things? We'll get into that. Makkari's coming to Spotlights on June 18th alongside X-23 and Gladiator. That is a pretty good Spotlight week to be in. She is a 3 cost, now 4 powered card with the ability after the turn runs from your hand to a random location if possible. Basically, if there's space on the board, Makkari is just going to jump to one of those spaces at the end of the turn that you drew her. Okay, so similar to kind of like an M'Baku or Angel where she's just running out to the board, or even like Proxima Midnight, but it is a random location. So is this good? Is this bad? Does the 4 power matter? We're going to talk about that. I'm going to go over her best synergies, the good, the bad, and the ugly for Makkari and her ability. And I'll give you 3 deck ideas that you can play right in the first week that she comes out, and then I'll just give my final reviews and ratings of the Spotlight week and Makkari herself. So let's get into it. So when we think of Makkari's best synergies, we got to start with the obvious Silver Surfer. Look, Makkari is a 3 cost card. She's going to play herself to the board for free, but she's still a 3 cost card on the board. She does get buffed by Silver Surfer. So it's no surprise that she likes Silver Surfer, but does Silver Surfer like her? There are a lot of 3 cost cards in the game. You cannot put all of them into your Silver Surfer deck, okay? So she will be competing against other 3 cost cards, and we're going to talk about if she can make that cut or not. Next up, we have a card like Storm, okay? Another 3 cost card here. But what's interesting with Storm is that you're locking off a location early, trying to shut down. You want as much power there as possible. Makkari's going to play herself for free by herself, and it's going to happen early. If you drew Makkari turn 1, she's playing herself turn 1. Turn 2, she plays herself turn 2. So you have that free 4 power on the board. You can then play Storm. You already have a big priority lead on that location, and Makkari just might help you snag a Storm lane really consistently. And then lastly is a bit surprising, Moon Girl. Okay, this is something I actually heard from Glazer, and he heard it from somebody else, I'm not sure who, but he mentioned how Moon Girl has synergy with Makkari. Why? Well, Makkari's leaving your hand. Okay, she plays herself for free, so you have 1 less card in your hand. If you've ever tried playing Moon Girl, the hand size limit sucks when you can only have 7 cards. If you have 4 in your hands and you go to duplicate stuff, you're only duplicating the first 3, and then your hand is full, and then you can't draw the next turn. But you're playing a Moon Girl deck, it's kind of combo based, you want to draw. Well, Makkari is giving you extra hand space without just losing a card, like Black Cat, who just discards herself. She's giving you 4 power on the board and hand space for Moon Girl to duplicate cards, so it's very interesting, and it may just turn out to be a pretty good synergy. First up, we'll start with the good, as we always do. She is a free card on the board. Okay, we got a little asterisk here. We will talk about that. But she's playing herself for free. You don't have to pay the energy. That seems cool. That sounds good. Right away, that sounds good. She's the best card for gaining priority. Okay, she often plays herself on turn 1 because at the start of the game, you draw 3 cards. Right when turn 1 starts, you draw a 4th card. So if she's in there, she's playing herself. If you also had a 1 cost card to play that turn, you got a bunch of power on the board, possibly on different locations. You're going to have priority on turn 2. Some decks really like that. She can run to locations that you can't play on because she's running there. You're not playing her. It's like in M'Baku. She can jump to any location. She can go to something like Sanctum Sanctorum. Okay, that could be very good if you get lucky. And then it's kind of hard to counter her. You know, if your opponent plays Spider-Ham and Makkari did start in the very left side of your hand, Spider-Ham would hit Makkari before the end of that turn and Makkari jumps. So she would just become a 3-4. And if your board gets full, well, Makkari's kind of hurting you there, so that can kind of counter it. But other than that, your opponent can't really counter Makkari, right? They can't stop her from just running to a location unless it's full or they hit it with Spider-Ham. They can't hit Makkari with Shang-Chi or Shadow King or Rogue or anything. Makkari's running. She's running to a location. There's very little that can stop her. So if she turns out to be good and pretty consistent, it's just going to be hard for your opponent to do anything about it. Now to talk about the bad. I mentioned how the free had an asterisk. Well, first of all, you drew Makkari. So when she runs to a location, you have one less card in your hand. I mentioned that could be good for Moon Girl, but other decks don't like that, okay? Other decks want cards in their hand, and so you can play as many options as you have. You just have one less space in your hand, and in your deck, you're building a 12-card deck. One of those cards is Makkari, who once is on the board does not have an ability. Once she hits the board, she's just a 3/4. She's just stats. That's it. So you're replacing a card that potentially has an ability or tech options with this vanilla 3/4 when she hits the board. She goes to a random location. Well, I mentioned that can be good. That can also be bad. Okay, she could jump right to Space Throne on turn 1 and you just had to retreat. But if she does jump somewhere early and it's bad, you just retreat for 1 cube. It's not the worst outcome, right? It's kind of like when Gladiator accidentally pulls a Magneto or something. You just retreat for 1. She can fill a lane early. I mentioned that she might like Silver Surfer, but Silver Surfer runs Brood. If you played Brood and then you draw Makkari next turn and she just runs to that Brood lane, well, it got full. You're going to buff it still, but your lane got full. That's not great if it gets full early. And then she has few synergies. Okay, I mentioned she has few counters, but she really doesn't synergize with anything either because she's not interacting with stuff. Besides getting buffed by Silver Surfer, being good for priority, which might help cards like Storm or Professor X, and maybe helping out Moon Girl, there's just no other benefit she's adding to decks. Okay, again, she's kind of like that vanilla 3/4. She maybe just doesn't do enough to make it worthwhile to play her over another card that actually synergizes with the rest of your deck. And if you're liking this video so far, this is just my friendly reminder to give it a like, give it that thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already because we cover every single new card in Marvel Snap. Now let's talk about my favorite section of the video, the floor and ceiling for Makkari. Makkari's floor, or at her reasonable worst, is that, first of all, she runs to a bad location. Okay, so she's running for free, right? You're not paying energy for her, but she just runs to a bad location. This can mean literally a location like Space Throne or something where you don't want her. It can also mean a location that you've already played a Brood on, or you've played 3 cards and she fills it. You know, just a location that you do not want her on, she runs there, and that feels bad. Second up is that you're missing a draw and you just miss your turn 3 play. Okay? Let's say you had a scenario and your deck, you had a 1-cost card in hand, a 2-cost card right on turn 2. You had a 3-cost card, I don't know, let's say it was Nocturne, and then maybe you had bigger stuff like Doctor Doom and Red Hulk, okay? So on turn 1, you had a 1-cost card ready. Turn 2, you had that 2 ready. Turn 3, you had that Nocturne ready, okay? But that was it. If you didn't have Nocturne in your hand, your other stuff was too big, okay? You had some 6-cost cards, maybe 5-cost cards. Well, let's say you replace Nocturne with Makkari in that same deck, and you drew it that order. Turn 1, you play your 1-cost. Makkari plays herself. Oh, that seems great. You got a free card on the board. Turn 2, you play your 2-cost. Turn 3, you have nothing to play. Your 3-cost already played herself on turn 1, okay? And so now you're floating energy on turn 3. So you basically missed a play. You got Makkari out early, but you essentially played her on turn 3 as just a 3/4, okay? So if she makes it so you miss a draw and you miss a 3-cost card, well then you do actually end up paying 3 energy for her, and you just played a vanilla 3/4, and you might as well just put Cyclops in your deck because you kind of screwed yourself over. Okay, so that's bad. Okay, the effective stats there would be that she's literally a 3/4 and she went to a bad location because it was random. So that's going to happen. She's missing a draw for you. That's really bad if it turns out you miss your curve. That's not viable. Okay, that's pretty bad and harmful, I think, because it is going to a potentially negative location. It's obviously not competitive. Now, what about Makkari at her best? What's her ceiling? Something you hope to achieve. It's that she goes to a good location, something like Sanctum Sanctorum, maybe something that's just kind of neutral, or just something that adds like extra power that you're happy with. And it didn't miss a draw or a play, okay? All the cards that you needed, you drew anyways, right? You didn't see the effect of the misdraw. Your deck is one that often at the end of the game, you have a couple cards in hand, so you have that kind of flexibility there. You don't always play every card, which is most decks. And you just drew well. Makkari didn't mess any of that up. You just got free, extra 4 power on board. It went to a fine location or even a beneficial one. In that case, Makkari's just a 0-4 that doesn't mess with you at all. That would be overpowered if she did that every single game. Now, obviously, she doesn't. There is RNG involved. Where is her average? I believe it's that she's going to run to a neutral location. Yes, there are some locations that are really good. There are some locations that are really bad. Often, it's going to be neutral. Okay, it's going to be neutral or even maybe a bit beneficial. She can go to like Death's Domain or something. But you are going to feel that missed draw. You are playing the game with one less card in your hand than your opponent is. Okay, the trade-off is that you got this free 4 power on the board. Is that worth it? It depends. It might be, it might not be. It might depend on the deck you're playing, what your opponent is playing, the locations. But she's going to be that free 4 power, but you are going to feel the effects of the misdraw a bit. Okay, you may not miss like your turn 3 completely, but you may have to change the cards you play, later on. It might just mess with your curve. That's where I think Makkari's average falls. So the first deck I've prepared for Makkari is this Tempo Lockdown list. Now this is something I love to run. It's like my favorite deck, and it can struggle with just power on the board. Okay, if you're looking to lock down the board, especially with Storm, she's great at locking down the board, but she's only 2 power. Okay, so the rest of this deck is really built to kind of power up with lockdown. I mean, we got the Nebula, the White Widow, the Jeff. Miss Marvel can add power to close lanes. Same thing with Doctor Doom. And it's possible that we do a turn 4 Storm into turn 5 Legion, flood all the locations, close the board off, no one can play anything on turn 6. Okay, if that's the case, we're very happy to have Makkari's extra 4 power on the board. We can slide 4 power in before we close a lane off with Storm, or even if we close off all lanes and we drew Makkari on turn 6, she would play herself, and that's an extra 4 power, and our opponent can't add any, so we would be very happy about that. Next up, I've got Makkari in a Sarah Surfer list. Okay, this is a pretty standard Surfer list. And I mentioned before that Makkari definitely likes Surfer, but we don't know if Surfer likes Makkari. Okay, we're going to have to find out. I think she is better in a Surfer deck that does not use magic because you have less cards in your hand. This one isn't as combo oriented. You want to actually end the game right on turn 6, and Makkari is helping you have enough power on the board. Okay, you do have to watch out for the broodlings, but hopefully Makkari plays herself on turns 1 or 2 often, and so she's going to go to the board before you play brood, and you're going to know, which lane to avoid. So I think this deck will work about as well as a standard Surfer list does. Does it make it better or worse though? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it makes Surfer better. It's a nice target. If you buff her up, it's an extra 6 power, but you do lose a bit of tech. So we're going to have to see. And last up is this High Evo Moon Girl list. Okay, now listen, I mentioned Moon Girl. I got to throw in a Moon Girl deck here. Okay, Makkari is going to help you empty your hand. And that's good for Moon Girl. If you want to be duplicating your She-Hulks, you get them discounted. You can play multiple She-Hulks on the same turn. Same thing with Abomination. If he gets discounts from the evolved Cyclops hitting cards, from your Scorpion hitting cards, you could have 2 really cheap 9 power Abominations. That's going to feel good. And I don't think this deck is as negatively impacted as losing a card from your hand, because it doesn't mind floating energy, right? You want to float energy to power up Surfer, trigger Misty Knight, trigger Cyclops, trigger the Evolved Hulk. And so when you have less cards in your hand, yeah, you're going to float some more energy, and you're okay with that. You're actually getting powered up. So a 0-4 Makkari is much better than a 3/4 Makkari in this deck, a 3/4 like vanilla card, even if you didn't play anything on turn 3. Okay, you're actually getting benefit from that missed turn. So it kind of takes away a negative aspect of Makkari when she does mess up your draws. This deck is very forgiving for that, and I think that's a very good thing. Now let's break down this Spotlight week from June 18th to June 25th. We have Makkari, X23, and Gladiator in Spotlights. In terms of token value, yeah, it's good. Makkari Series 5, obviously, she's the new card. X23 is still Series 5, so she's a full 6,000 tokens. And Gladiator is only Series 4. He just recently dropped down. He's now 3,000 tokens, so his Spotlight key isn't worth as much when you open him. But, you know, it's fine. We got 2 Series 5, 1 Series 4. That's decent. In terms of being competitive, I think it's really good. Okay, I'm not really including Makkari here because 1, we don't know how she's going to perform, and 2, I really don't have high hopes for her, so you can tell I'm not including her in this rating. But we know X23 and Gladiator are good. Okay, if you want to play Destroy, you need X23. It's kind of that simple. Gladiator is just a good card. He's a solid buy, solid pickup, pretty flexible, needed in like a Baron Zemo mill deck. So great level of competitive cards from this Spotlight. In terms of the variants, I think they're okay. Art is subjective. You might really like all of these variants. I'm not huge on this Makkari one. I think her base art might be better. The Gladiator one looks like most Gladiator variants were just kind of standing there with his cape and his mohawk. I'm not too excited about this. The X23 one I like. Okay, the 2 stars here basically comes from X23. I do like this variant. She's got some other good ones though, so it's up to you, but I don't think it's the best Spotlights for chasing after variants. So to give my final ratings and predictions from Makkari herself, first up, in terms of being fun, yeah, she's okay. I mean, she's kind of a stat stick, right? She's literally just 4 power that goes to the board, so that's a stat stick. But it is going to be interesting to see where she goes. Which location does she run to? If it really helps you out, that's going to feel really good. If it screws you over, you're going to retreat, but it's going to be kind of memorable. If it happens to your opponent, you're going to think it's funny. You might laugh a bit. It adds a little fun element, okay? So she's a bit more fun than just a stat stick card. In terms of being flexible, yeah, she's okay. Okay, again, it's just a 2-star thing. There are a lot of decks where you just don't want her. Okay, I know, free 4 power, but she's going to a random location. A lot of decks don't want that. A lot of decks have very specific synergy, right? If you're playing discard or destroy, you have a very set list of cards. All your cards synergize. Makkari doesn't synergize with many things. So decks don't want that. They don't want one less card in their hand because she plays herself. But you could just kind of flex her into some homebrews or just any deck where you want some more power. So she's going to be okay there. She isn't super niche. In terms of being competitive, and this is the biggest prediction, right? This is the most guesswork we have to do. I think she's okay. Now, before, when she was a 3/3, I thought she was bad. Okay, I had her ranked just 1 star. I thought she was clearly the worst card of the season, okay, or that she would be. And I know people were like, oh, she's going to work in Cerebro 3. Cerebro 3 doesn't want this card. Okay, those decks were not going to want Makkari jump into a location that all of a sudden powers her up and ruins your whole game plan. I think she's okay still. The 4 power is nice. It's better. It's better for Silver Surfer. It's better for the tempo or lockdown decks I mentioned, where you're just chasing priority. You're trying to close off the board. It could work better in like the Moon Girl stuff. It's basically better. In every case, besides Cerebro 3, you know, giving a card +1 power is a buff. It's basically always good, okay? If she went to a 3/5, that might be too good. It would be too flexible maybe. You just put it in every deck because a free 5 power is now better. So there is a certain line. There's a threshold where her free power becomes really good and even becomes overpowered. If you can just get a card with good power for free on the board, it becomes too good. Where that line is hard to decipher. Is it 5 power? Does that mean she's really close to it? How big is that jump from 4 power to 5? How much does that matter? In my mind, I think she's okay. I don't think she's actually that good competitively. because of the fact that you're losing her from your hand. And it means if you didn't have her, you could have a different card in your hand that, although you had to pay energy for, you would have time to play it, and it would actually have more power and or a real ability that helps your deck and helps you in the game. So my thoughts on Makkari is that she is not worth chasing after, okay? Now again, we're going to have to wait and see. Wait until she comes out. Have a couple days pass. See how she's performing, how many decks she's being played in, and how well those decks are working. Because maybe it turns out that this 4 power is just insanely good and every deck wants it, right? That's possible. I highly doubt it. So those are my thoughts. We're going to have to see how it goes. I'm very interested to see how she goes. It's a pretty interesting card, interesting ability. Again, there is a line where she becomes overpowered. Where is that line? Okay, we're going to have to see how well this 4 power holds up, especially in the current meta of Marvel Snap. So let me know what you think about Makkari, what your predictions are, what decks and combos you think she will work best in. And until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.